All right. So I suppose, because obviously I know you very well, but the audience have no idea who is the man sitting here on the sofa, so maybe a good thing to start is just introducing yourself, who you are, and I'll explain why I got you on.
Okay, so my name is Ian McTear. I'm a chiropractor, and I specialize in posture. Well, it's the thing which I have specialized in, let's put it that way. And I realized quite early on that posture is the basis of all healthcare. As in, if you get the posture correct, the rest of the body works at its optimum. And if you get the body working at its optimum, that means that it can heal itself to a degree. I mean, it means all the systems will work properly. Your cardiovascular, your respiratory, everything will work properly. And if you can get the body to work properly, it will heal itself. If you put it under stress and strain, then it's going to struggle to fight to correct any imbalances. And that's what it's about. It's about creating as much balance as you can back in the body.
No, I mean, I guess this is sort of how I found you. Ironically, I didn't find you myself. So a mutual friend of ours, Benoit Vielefond, who's a famous musician, and he's very funny and charismatic, French man. But I would say, because I'm an extreme person in alternative medicine, and he's not. So he's very open to these things to an extent, but very pessimistic in his belief system. So when he said that he found this chiropractor and he's worked magic on me, and even just the point when he used those words, magic on me, I thought, I better go see this man myself. And the reason I've come to you is simply because I had an injury where I fell down a flight of stairs in 2015 and my hip's never been quite the same. And when I used to be in corporate, I obviously was abusing my medical insurance, going to chiropractors, physios on a weekly basis, but it just felt that they were, I'm going to use the word, just clicking me into place. But within a couple of days' time, the pain would just, I would say, resurrect itself, so I almost the same came to you out of desperation, going like, well, if Benoit says this man's worked magic on him, hopefully you can do the same for me too, even though I came in with a bit of a pessimistic view as well. I was like, what's the difference? Because I've been to numerous chiropractors over the years, but I haven't quite seen the transformation, because they've always said, come weekly, do this. But there's not long change or sustained change. And I seem to find that with your work, and maybe because you're also open to alternative medicine, not just I call them the one-dimensional Westerners, just doing chiropractics and you're just sort of a bone doctor and you go click, click. You've actually, I think, broadened, because from your background as well, you used to be a healer, isn't it?
Yeah, I spent 8 years doing healing. As far as the chiropractic approach is, approach to most chiropractors, it's they're following a certain type of pattern which works as best they can. But I wasn't happy with the results I was getting. And so I had to, first of all, break down what I was being taught and try and understand what it was supposed to do. And the tests, test as well. And what that did was that showed me that a lot of the practice was very ineffective. It was very limited in its results, and I wanted to improve on that. And so I first of all worked out a testing system which actually tested everything that I was doing. And so literally, as I go through the treatment, I can test everything, and see that it wasn't just a muscle test to see whether that muscle is now working, but it was whether or not that had a global effect on the whole body. And if it had a global effect on the whole body, then it's having an effect. And then I could see whether or not that was going to be a positive effect, and whether it could hold. And if I got those two things working, there's a positive effect and it was holding, then I could then say, well, I'm going to try and I'll keep that. But if it didn't, I'd say, well, what's the point? What's the point of using it? You know, and so I'd get rid of it. And if I got rid of it, then I've got to find something to replace it. So then I then started looking for ways to, or other techniques to improve upon the technique which I had. And when I found, so I'd go out and then I'd go and get these new techniques and go on different courses and get the new techniques. Which was fine, and then I would go home and I'd test them again and again and again, and I'd actually put them through my testing system, and so I'd then throw a lot of that stuff out, and often they found these new techniques came with different ideas behind, different philosophies behind, so I could then test those philosophies as well and test the ideas behind them, and once I got that. Well, it meant that actually threw a lot of those things out as well. And I'd go and learn new techniques and find that actually they didn't work either. But it meant that at least I had something to aim for, a goal to aim for, something to go looking for, and then I'd try lots of different types of alternative techniques as well as the standard one, and you get to the point where you just can't find a technique which would work. And so then you'd have to work it out yourself. You have to go, well, why won't that work? What does it require to make this work? And then you go and actually start working that out. And once you've worked those things out and you get a result and you get a positive result and it holds, then you can say, well, okay, well, what are the principles behind that? And when you get the principles behind that, now you actually have an understanding. And when you get that understanding, you can then go and retest everything else and say, well, okay, well, how does that fit into those? How do those techniques fit into that understanding? And often, I would have to rethink about how things are supposed to work. And I would then get a proper idea of what's going on in the body and why it's going on in the body and why it isn't working and why it is working and that sort of stuff. And eventually I'd end up with a technique which I was happy with. And then over time, built up a set of techniques and a pattern of techniques which worked on most people.
Right.
And that's what I did. But obviously, you get people come in every so often who aren't
your challenge
normal, yeah, and are challenging, and that's great because that's really really good. Because then you go, hang on, now I've got to challenge myself, and so you look forward to those sort of things.
Yeah.
And when they do come up, you go, oh great, okay, so I've got something I can play with now, and you can challenge yourself, and yeah, so that's why I like.
That's really amazing.
Patients, yeah.
Well, actually, I had literally last night. I had a client come. He's 81 years old. Everything's gone wrong. And in his case, actually, he said his joints between his hip bones have just sort of filed themselves away. So he has this long-term pain now that he just obviously can't manage. And the Western doctors won't do anything because he's too old to operate. He's got too many autoimmune type conditions that are going on. And I thought, oh, challenge, isn't it?
81.
Yeah.
That's not old.
Well,
you're
sorry,
not old,
too old.
You're not
Too old to operate, I suppose, with his let's put it with his profile. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he's got sort of an autoimmune condition where he was born with hepatitis. So it's quite difficult. So he's on like certain medication that's keeping him alive. But then I thought to myself, well, because he's on immunosuppressants, I thought, that's a bit tricky now because anything I would prescribe, his immune system would be stimulated, so can't do that. And I thought, I do love this challenge because then as soon as he comes in, you think, out of my whole toolbox, what can I actually do? Because sort of that's the will of the helper and the healer. You want to try and help someone, and you just think, I bloody well hope I can, right?
Yeah.
And then I just obviously applied different steps and tools that I thought I could do, and then hopefully see. I mean, I'll find out in a couple of days' time to see if what I've done has actually helped him. But you're right. But I mean, I know that you're, busy writing a book, because what I really like about what you've done is that you've actually understood what you've learned, right? And that's through your testing. And I think that's the most common problem I come across with people, is that people do a course. There's so many fad courses online now. Become a coach for $9.99, or do this, do that for so little. But I think the proof in where someone excels in their career or becomes famous in what they do, or knowledgeable or credible, is because you actually understand your work. And there's that principle of going out there and earning your experience, I think. And I think obviously you haven't just taken chiropractics at face value. And I've said this to you many times. In my country, when I've been born, chiropractors in my mind are like doctors. They have that credibility, that stance here. But you've said, when you studied chiropractics in this country, it was recognized as just sort of like a Reiki practitioner, like airy fairy and a bit alternative, isn't it?
Yeah, when I started training, it was chiropractor wasn't regulated, and so they weren't really held in any regard at all. Well, not in this country, but in America and Australia and possibly South Africa. But in this country, they weren't. But in 2000, they became regulated, and so they became under a government board, which meant that there has to be a standard of testing, and there has to be a standard of learning, and so I arrived about that time, So I finished my training around about that time. But it did mean that a lot of people just didn't know what a chiropractor was in this country, because we've had osteopaths, and they've taken over the role of the bone crackers that we used to have from the days of old, who eventually became the orthopedic surgeons, and so the osteopaths filled that gap. And chiropractors were thought of as it's an American thing, but I decided to do chiropractic as opposed to osteopathic.
What is the difference? Because to the person out there, they go, well, they both pretty much do the same thing, but what are the key differences? Maybe that can be a good guideline to us, I hope.
Yeah, well, the best explanation that I've ever heard is spelling.
Okay.
because we do exactly the same thing. We should do exactly the same thing. In fact, in Melbourne, they do the first 2 years together.
All right, because that's where you've studied. You've studied your chiropractics.
No, I studied here, but I went to work there. But initially, that's what place I first started. I worked for about 5 years. So they do their first 2 years there, and then they go off with their own instructors to do the techniques. But basically, they're learning exactly the same thing.
Okay, so it's just the spelling
so
then.
there's slightly different philosophies behind it, but basically they're doing exactly the same thing. And if they're not, they should be. They should be understanding what the other person's doing down the road anyway. So like I say, spelling. That's the best explanation.
That's a good one. That's good. Yeah, but I mean, would you say now when someone's like, oh, should I go to a chiro or should I go to an osteo? What do you think would sort of be the right answer? Is you can't even say it's condition specific?
No, it's a very individual thing. It's a very, very individual thing. It's I don't please every patient comes to see me. I mean, some of them just don't like my technique. That's fine. Go and find someone else. But do go and find someone else. Don't just go, oh, right, I'm giving up. No, go and find someone else. Go and try another technique.
Yeah.
Whether that can be chiropractic or osteopathic, or maybe something else.
Yeah, because I think there's something out there for everyone. But I guess, I think it's not something I do yet, but sort of we've been working together where you've been training me ever so slightly and helping me understand your view and your perspective about the body. But I think your main core principle is posture is everything. And I really do believe that, because the more I'm diversifying in my studies, I really think that's true, because if you got your posture straight and correct, so the most common one that I'm seeing now, because I obviously work with the central region of the body, the abdomen, where all the major organs are. If your posture's off, you're squashing all your organs, and therefore your organs can't be operating at optimum levels, whether, depending whether it's your liver, your stomach, your spleen, your kidneys, etc. That's causing, a lot of people, as people get older, always seem to have this problem with constant going to the toilet. I think that's posture related. But people don't think, hey, let me go get something checked out. It's just there's this terrible society's conditioning about I'm just getting older. That's why I have this problem.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it's like, no, you have an issue that you're not aware about. And I think there's a lack of understanding out there, oh, maybe I should get something checked out. And people always seem to go to doctors, I'm going to use the word doctors, or alternative healers, only when something's wrong. People don't go when, I use the word, when it's a maintenance period. Because if you just keep going for a checkup, then a problem can never happen, is it? Like people take their cars every year for a service, that kind of thing. I mean, maybe MOTs because they're required, but maybe people wouldn't do it. But people go get their cars checked up every year, and then it prevents the car from ever having a massive breakdown or something very expensive or irreversible. And I don't know why people don't apply the same logic to their bodies. We are a machine. We never switch off because that would mean death. So, I think that's important. And I think the first place in my mind to start would be checking your diet and checking your bones.
Yeah. I think you have to become aware of what is right and what is wrong in your body. And so when I'm treating people, I tend to work on the principle that I'm going to put them back into their correct position. So I release, I realign, I balance the person. But then I educate them. And what I'm trying to do with that is give them exercises, yes, which are going to help alleviate the problem they have, but also educate them into what is their correct postural positioning. And when they're in that correct position, for them to understand what it feels like and become aware of their body. And this is the biggest problem. People aren't aware of their body. And when you're aware of your body, then you become aware when you're not working correctly. And when you're not working correctly, that's the time, go and see someone. Yeah. And you kind of go, well, I'm not in any pain, but, this just isn't working. Or I can't move as well as I used to be able to. I'm not breathing as well as I used to be able to. I don't feel that my joints are moving freely or comfortably like they used to. And then you've got to understand, well, I'm doing the exercises and yet this isn't working. Then go and see someone. That's my feeling. Some people do need to do maintenance. And they're generally people who have underlying conditions. And then I'm happy to see them as maintenance. But generally, I'm trying to train my patients to look after themselves as much as possible and become really, really aware of their bodies. And they've got to be working on the principle that they're going to get better and better and better and better and better at this as they get older and older. I'm often saying to my pensioners, this is a time when your job is to look after your body. And the more you look after your body and your mind, the more your body and mind will look after you. And if you don't do it, you're going to really pay for it. Whereas when you were younger, your body could cope with it more. It had more scope for adaptation. When you're older, it doesn't. So you need to work at it. It's your job to look after yourself.
Which people don't think, because people, I would say, live to work. They wake up every day, they push themselves. I think I see probably with my work a lot of people with energy depletion, adrenals that have just completely run out because the cortisol levels are just through the roof. Bad diet, that kind of thing as well. So it is really important, and it's so.
Yeah, you got to sort out the hormonal side of it as well. Definitely, yes. Absolutely. If you can sort that out, it's so much better for your not just the physiological but the neurological as well. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but it sounds like what you've said as well is education about mindset. You got to believe you're going to get better. You got to feel you're going to get better, and that will help also create a pathway that will allow that to happen. Whether you call that manifestation, whether you call belief or mindset, I don't know.
It's a confidence. Once you really start to understand and feel your body working properly, you get a confidence in your body. When you start to lose that confidence in your body, it's because things are going wrong, and this is why you've got to be aware of your body. Elderly people understand this because they can't do the things they used to be able to do, and so they lose the confidence that their body can do those things. Whereas if they start to work and then go, if they use that as an impetus to go and work the body and mobilize the body and find a way of enjoying doing that. And this is what I'm often saying to my patients: look, go and find something you love to do, and then do that. And that in itself will mean that you actually are physical and you're active and you're getting your body is getting the nutrients of exercise that it requires. And then you might find that, okay, well, that's not covering everything your body needs. No, but then you maybe just go and do a class. And if you're naturally flexible, you go and do a yoga class, or if you're not naturally flexible, you do a Tai Chi or a Qigong type class, or you find, or best of all, you go and do a dance class, something like that. But something you really, really enjoy. Find something and then stick to it. And you will find like-minded people as well. So that's mental and physical and psychological. Those are the things you're working on.
So would you say, because I don't know, what is sort of the age profile of people you treat? Is it all ages? Is there a specific niche that you have at the moment?
Well, I treat all ages, preferably over the age of 5, but all ages. But predominantly, I treat a lot of elderly patients.
All right.
And I like that because they come in with layers and layers and layers of problems. I know most chiropractors don't like that because it's a lot easier if you just go, oh, I've just got a shoulder problem. You kind of go, yeah, what's causing that shoulder problem? What are the underlying conditions? And so I look at all the underlying conditions and I break those down and I treat those, and the symptoms, what they came in with, disappear. And that's the way we should be looking at the body, and that's the way we should be treating it.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is, isn't it? It's root caused treatment rather than symptom based.
Yeah, well, the symptom is just the end of the line, generally, unless it's been a blunt force trauma, then you've got to, and then you've got to look at that as well.
Yeah, so I think you've come up with a couple of principles that you like to live by. I don't know if so with your work, the principles, the laws of principles that you follow, is that something you want to share with people, or
on posture?
Yeah,
it's that any tension held in the body has to have an equal and opposite effect. So if you were to walk around just holding a jaw tight, you can guarantee there's going to be an effect somewhere else, or a few places which will balance that out. And if you leave that there, then your body will then have adapted in such a way that it will get stuck. And the fact that it's actually getting stuck in those positions means that other parts of the body then have to adapt to that. And so eventually you end up with getting a cascade of effects through the body. So this is why you have to be aware of when your body is starting to tense up, and why it's tensing up, and where it's tensing up, and then work on releasing those points. If you leave those in the body and you get this cascade effect, you're going to create weaknesses. Anywhere where you hold tension, you're not just going to have an equal and opposite tension somewhere else, but eventually they will lead to weaknesses in places. A prime example is that everybody loves core stability, don't they? Everyone's going, oh, it's because you're weak at the front. Well, you're not weak at the front, because as soon as you straighten up the back, oh my God, it's a miracle, your front straightens up. No, it wasn't weak. It just couldn't be applied, or it couldn't be activated. And so yes, you're going to get weaknesses in the body because you're holding tension, and that's really simple principles. And those are the basic principles of posture. When you understand that, a lot of the other stuff just fits in. And so this is why I feel that posture is the base of all healthcare, because once you've undone those things, so then the body can work close to its optimum. That's posture.
Yeah. So I think that's sort of how it comes back. So when I go to a traditional chiropractor, they'll go, oh, you've got a neck pain, let me just click you into place. And what they're doing is they're not actually remedying the problem. They're just putting me into a different position of which my body was originally putting it out of place because it's compensating. So they're not addressing, again, the cause. They're just treating my symptom. And I think, so like sort of just an examples, when I come to you for a treatment, I'll stand sort of like a mugshot, isn't it? I stand at a distance and you just examine my whole body. And then you, I don't know, with your talent, of course, you can obviously see where either I'm swaying too much on one position, or if I'm putting too much weight on the one side, that kind of thing, how my feet are stabilized or not, that kind of thing. And through that, then you can sort of just see almost like I guess connecting the dots, where dung 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 dung, you can just sort of see the pattern, and almost probably you do know where the origination or the causes, or you probably do that through when you actually go into the contact touch of the therapy. I'm not sure, it's sort of your protocol.
Yeah, all that's right. But also the other thing I'm looking for is where the person's holding a center of gravity, and this is really it's the thing which is changing, or will change healthcare. If you understand where you hold your center of gravity, you have to be able to see what the symptoms are going to be around it. And so as a practitioner, but they don't know they're doing this, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to release the body, and in doing so they're trying to lower the center of gravity. And if we all understood that, we would realize that actually we want our center of gravity pelvic layer, but pelvic or below, and that allows the body to work in a way which allows a free and even flow of movement through it, and that's what we want. And if you get that, you're like I say, your body's working close to its optimum. And that's a whole new kind of concept of the way people should be approaching the body. We can get rid of the rubbish about core stability, and we can start applying understanding about where we're holding our center of gravity. And what's interesting about center of gravity is not just how high up the body, it's how anterior or posterior it is in the front or back, and also is it even? So some people come to see me and their center of gravity might be from their right hip to their left shoulder. And that's creating a massive twisting effect through the body. You've got to understand these things, and if you do so, treatment's a lot easier as well.
Right. And do you find that takes multiple sessions for someone to sort of grasp this concept? Because I think this is a concept you've come up with, like you've created it through obviously through your experience, and almost something I feel would be good to share with the world, because once people start grasping this concept, they can actually start to improve their posture, and then fundamentally have a knock-on effect that maybe people's health will improve significantly overall, and there'll be less need to go to doctors, or maybe there might be less disease, this kind of thing, hopefully.
Huh?
Yeah. Let's go there.
Yeah. These are things that all practitioners and all patients should start to understand this. The more you understand this stuff, the better you are. The better physically and structurally, or obviously structurally. So most people who come through, they have a postural structural distortion, and so what we're trying to do is I'm trying to undo that distortion, so it allows the body to work at its optimum. And to do that, and for it to hold, they've got to change the way they hold themselves, and that's changing their posture. And in changing your posture, you're lowering the center of gravity. So everything all works together. And in doing so, it means that your general health will improve. And that's what we're after, really, isn't it? I mean, we're all after, as practitioners, we're all trying to make our patients, well, hopefully, make them well and make them stay well, and be able to look after themselves.
Yeah.
Though I'm sure some of my colleagues wouldn't be too happy with that.
Well, yeah, because I remember hearing this a long time ago, but I thought doctors should only be paid when people are well. And I thought, that's really clever, actually, because you should be rewarded based on good service. If people are constantly coming back to you, you're obviously not doing something right. But a very good principle I remember that you taught me, I don't know, so many years ago, is that, I mean, the way I've imagined it as an analogy is like a bar. If there's 100% in your bar and
Stress box.
your stress box, sorry, I mean, this is how I remember it. But obviously, we only have a finite amount of percent in this. If we have 100%, if we're in 80% pain, that 80% is just being focused or used on, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain. But your principle is, if we get you out of that physical pain by getting your posture and your structure correct, imagine what you can use that other 80% for, whether then we can focusing on, you know, whether it's emotional imbalance or mental health imbalance, that kind of thing, and mental well-being. Then imagine again how different the world would be. Because, you know, I don't really know anyone, maybe it's because of the work I do, but I just seem to attract it. I don't really know many people that are in very good state of health. You know, everyone's, oh, I've got a gut problem, or I'm bloated, or I've got this back problem, oh my god, this knee pain, or I've got this headache, or I've got this toothache. It's like we always seem to have something going on.
The problem is with our job is we attract people to talk about this thing. So not only do we see them during the day, but people come and talk to us about them at night. People who are well, don't bother.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's the thing. And as far as stress box is concerned, the way I look at it is that we've got a stress box. That is the maximum amount of stress that we can handle. If you're physically stressed up to 80%, that means you've only got 20% for neurological and mental stress, you know, and which means that any mental stress you have is going to seem really, really prominent, and it's going to be really forthright in your mind because you're held under stress the whole time. If your physical stress is at 20%, you've now got 80% of space to handle a little bit of mental or psychological stress, and so you'll be able to cope with it a lot easier. It's as simple as that.
But it's funny because you'd think physically being well, maybe, or would say posturally or structurally being well, would have an interesting knock-on effect to mental health. Because I don't know at the moment if this is what you see, but it just seems that everyone at the moment is now starting to talk, oh, I think I'm suffering with mental health. I'm suffering with mental health. And I start to think, okay, of course, there's obviously people that do, but if we could actually dissect it further and say people who genuinely maybe might have just been born with it, or, you know, certain triggers that have happened in their life or certain traumas in itself, and how many of that percent is actually just, if your body was in a bit of a better shape. Imagine, because I know when I'm, you know, either studying or working too much at some point, and then my exercise seems to be the first thing that gets turfed in the bin, I see how that affects me or impacts my mental health, right? But as soon as I get back into exercise, it's like, wow, I'm on top of the world. I can take everything back. And then I'm starting to appreciate more and more, again, as I get older, about, you know, most people think exercise is to look good. I think there's such deeper work at play, that it works on your bones, it works on your structure, it works on your posture, because you need all your muscles in the right place to obviously hold. Where I noticed, obviously, doing some exercises, which I said there was this machine that I did the EMS many months ago, where it's a bodysuit that you wear that will use electrodes to shock all your muscles. And then I noticed when I was doing side lunges that I had a lot of weakness in my right leg, and I thought, oh, there's my awareness. No wonder why I get left rhomboid pain, or there's something to do with this muscle being underworked or not used properly, because there's always this dominance issue, isn't it? Like you're using one hand more predominantly than something else, or when you're lifting something, what do you pick it up with? Is it you use your right leg more, your left leg more? Because again, maybe it's your sense of gravity discussion, but we don't really know how to use our body proportionately, isn't it? We always using one. It's easier because, oh, I'm right-handed, so I can pick up the grocery bag with my right hand, or I use my backpack and throw it on. Whereas it, you know, no one wants to look like the nerd with the double backpack. I do it. I look like an idiot, but I'm like, it's for my postural health. It's for my postural health. I don't know what you think about that.
Yes, you get people come in with certain patterns of problems, and it's you get commonly people are tighter on the left hand side, and that's compensating. It's compensating for the fact that the pelvis is twisted and tilted anteriorly right. So it's forward on the right hand side, and the pelvis is tilted further up the back. And because of that, the torso will naturally rotate to the left, but the brain won't let it. So it brings the torso back, which creates a torsion through the spine, but also tenses up the whole left hand side. And when you tense up the left hand side, it pulls the left shoulder back, which means the right shoulder has to sit forward. And as the right shoulder sits forward, you've now got an imbalance there, which actually creates a twisting of the head and neck, which means your head's got to be straightened up. And so the body is adapting. And this is your postural structural distortion. Now, if that's left in the body without activity, that leads to more tension. When I said earlier on, the rules of posture, if you have tension, you're going to have it equal and opposite places. If you leave it in there, it will solidify, and then it'll create other tensions. And that's exactly what this is. And so as you tense up and your body starts to hold it, then the spine is going to be restricting its motion. And then as the spine gets restricted in its motion, it's then going to affect the nervous system as it leaves the spine, which is then going to affect the muscles. And so you generally get tighter and tighter and tighter, which is the cascade of tension in other places. And if you keep holding that tension, eventually you end up starting a weakness in certain areas. And so you've got to understand that, and you've got to undo those things. Okay. And then you've got to teach the person to change the way they hold themselves. So it breaks down that pattern and get them active, and so that their body naturally flows and starts to move, and so it releases these things. This is why you've got to think of your activity as part of your job. It's fine when you're actually being active because your daily job makes you active, but if it doesn't, you've got to add it in. So those covers those kind of subjects you're talking about there.
So, like, everywhere I read, they always say you need to do a minimum of 1 hour exercise a day. I mean, do you think that's a lot, or is that the right amount? Can you do that 7 days a week? I mean,
it's down to the individual. I mean, if you've got an active job, then you don't need to do so much. If you've got an inactive job and you're not an active sort of person, so if you get up in the morning, have some breakfast, get in the car, drive to work, get out of the car, go and sit down all day, and then you come home and you just flop around, and you're not an active person. Other people who they get up in the morning, they do the cleaning, they run around and do a few things, and then they go to work. Yes, they get in the car, yes, they go and sit down, but at lunchtime they're running around doing stuff, or they get up during the day and they go and do things, and when they get home they do the cleaning, do the washing up. Oh, I'm going to do the washing. I've got to do a bit of lawn, a bit in the garden, or I want to do this. Is that mental attitude? So it's down to that. And if you realize where you are in that category of people, you can say, well, okay, well then I need to do more of this, or actually I don't. All I need to do is go for more walks, or I need to take the dog out more, or I need to go and play a bit of football, or go and do something. But I say, go and do something you enjoy. So you normally find those people who are naturally active, they were the ones they'll go and seek a dance class, or go and seek a yoga class. The ones who aren't, don't bother. And so this is the mental attitude. This is where it's got to be pointed out to the person where they are. Okay, look, you don't do very much. Now you've got to start thinking about this. This is important that you start thinking about this, because you don't use it. The old saying, you don't use it, you lose it. It's going to really apply to those people. And they're going to start having problems with their heart. They're going to start having problems with their kidneys because they're just not getting function. And then it's going to affect their mental state because they're not getting the function. So the neurological and the hormonal effects start to kick in. And so, the people have to be aware.
And do you think, because I was actually thinking about this the other night, because I think now the sun's coming out, a lot more people are getting into running again.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, I was always taught, like, for example, if you go to the gym and you run on the treadmill, it's very harsh on the joints. And I thought, well, do people need to do quite cardio moving, getting that heart rate up intensely, or is just slow walk for half an hour enough? Or do people need to do it? Because I'm thinking, are there certain exercises actually maybe that, you know, society says is good to do, like cycling, running, that kind of thing. But I was thinking they're quite hard on the joints, you know, bash, 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 bash. Then I think, well, what about from your perspective? Would you say maybe actually these kind of exercises maybe people should steer away from and do something like you said, like qigong or tai chi, where you're just flowing with the body, or maybe yoga where it's not too strenuous on the structural aspect of the body? I mean, I don't know what you think. Are there certain exercises you think people shouldn't do?
No, I think you do need to be thinking that you need to get not breathless, but you need to be pushing your cardiovascular sometimes. Even if it's not every day of the week, you know, or you know, just once or twice a week, you do need to be pushing your cardiovascular a little bit. Your heart and your lungs need to be worked. But yes, running's not right for everybody. You know, often depending on how their structure is aligned, depends how much pressure and percussion they get through the joints, and that for some people can be quite damaging. And so that's why you look for things you enjoy, and B, it's going to fit for you. So you know, that's why I say dancing. There's so many different types of dancing. Dancing's brilliant. It's like I say, God's gift to us, because it gives you a variety of different things you can do, and and it has a great effect on the body. And you can do it. You can find a dance which isn't going to damage you,
Yes.
and you can enjoy it at the same time. And that's the great thing. You can enjoy it at the same time, and so you tend to do a lot more because you enjoy it, and you don't even think about it. And if you can do an exercise where you don't think you're doing exercise, you're just enjoying yourself. Hallelujah.
Yeah. And then if I go to those certain type of people that like to do a lot of weightlifting, because it seems as sort of like when I first started exercise, it was always weights, weights, weights. But now it seems sort of it's becoming more mainstream to do body resistant exercise where you use your own body weight, or you have those kind of bands, calisthenic type workouts. I mean,
I think it's great. I think calisthenics is good. But if you're going to do weights, you need to be adding in some cardiovascular as well.
Okay.
You really, really do need to be thinking about that. You don't want your muscles just to be held in tension, tension, tension. You need to be getting. If you want overall fitness, and you don't want to be damaging yourself in the long run, and you might be fine for a few years, but in the long run, it will get to you. Ask anybody who's done powerlifting or bodylifting. It gets to you eventually. So you've got to add some cardiovascular in. You've got to do it. Find something you enjoy.
And just last question on the way. I always see these heavy lifters, weightlifters, they're always using this belt, this back brace belt. And I mean, I was taught that it's really bad because you become dependent on it and it makes your posture worse. And without it, then you just basically are like a sitting duck. But then some people say, oh, I need it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do. So, I mean, do you know much about that and how it affects the posture?
Yeah, I've been questioning this now for quite a while. I say I'm not a great fan of core stability, so holding tension, because when you hold tension and then you lift, by holding tension, you're creating tightness in the body, which you are actually fighting against. So to compensate for that, if you are lifting weights which are way beyond what your body naturally should be able to take, then maybe something like a belt is useful. I don't want to say yay or nay in this situation, but I know when I'm teaching my patients any lifting techniques and things, I often talk to them about actually not, yes, get yourself in the right position, but don't hold the core stability, because all that does is that pushes your center of gravity away from the center, which means that the weight you're lifting is creating more stress and strain for your body. And so you need to be thinking about releasing the body, because it allows the body to mold to the object which you're trying to lift. And that allows your center of gravity to be put over your legs, which means your legs are taking the weight, not your back and your shoulders and everything else. And so if you apply that to weights, I tend to ask my weightlifting patients to, and they're not going to do it, and they hate me for saying it, slightly lower your weight and relax and get yourself in the correct position. Now, with a belt, they tell me it makes it easier for them. And they might be right. I mean, I don't do heavy weightlifting, so I don't know for sure. And I can't really test it out. But if they're going to apply the rules of kind of releasing the body to allow all the body to work for them to lift, what do I mean by that? Okay, so if you hold tension, if you hold that core stability and you try and lift, like I said, it moves your center of gravity forward, which means that you're having to force yourself to pull yourself back, but it means you're only using certain aspects of your body. Whereas if you release your body and relax, when you go to lift, the stress and strain is spread over all the body, which means that you can then apply the pressure into your feet or into your legs or into your back or into your arms or into your fingers or to anywhere. But at the same time, you'll also be able to incorporate all the rest of the body to work at doing this particular job, this activity. And so you can focus the body into doing that as a whole, as opposed to just using pure pressure and I can't think of another word, but using that pure pressure just to force aspects of your body to work to lift this. You're not using all of your body. And so yeah, so from my point of view, if you want to be lifting weights, that's the way you should be thinking about it. You should be thinking about how can I get all my body to do the work and minimize the stress. So I'm spreading the stress over a larger area, which minimizes the chance of damage.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's going to be quite helpful as well, just for people out there to hear, because I guess we always wonder about these kind of things.
Yeah.
But another weird thing I want to share with you, because I think about you at work, is that I'm noticing people's facial structure is imbalanced, because you obviously say from the head up works all the way down, sort of up and down has a knock-on effect, but starting to see people being asymmetrical. So the nose is either just distorted or the jaws a bit pulled to the one side, and I think I just wish you could just come here and like to their face, and help them, because obviously it's creating a lot of nasal problems. Because I know when I broke my nose last year, I really started to have a newfound awareness about breathing. And then I have like a couple of patients that I've chatted to about, they've had nose surgeries, or, just for aesthetic purposes, but just sort of how their nose has been cut wrong, or nasal passage has been obstructed, that kind of thing. Or, in my case, structurally something had been broken, but people fall all the time or knock their teeth. And just purely the tension in the neck, I think, is that something I think when we just talk all the time, reiterate about the tension in the neck, just all the tightness in the muscles will pull on the face, and the face distorts itself.
So this postural structural distortion, it's not just in the physical torso. It has to have a knock-on effect all the way up through the body, and including up into the head. And so if your pelvis is twisted one way, then your rib cage is twisted the other way, which means your shoulders are twisted as well, which means it's going to have a knock-on effect all the way up through into your head, which means your jaw then also moves across to balance you out. The body's always trying to balance itself up. I mean, that's what it does. And in doing so, it can also cause problems. But it goes back to the posture rules again. But and so you often find that the jaw moves slightly often to the left. As it does so, it changes your bite, and because it changes your bite, it puts pressure on the maxilla, and so the maxilla then starts to twist slightly, which then I believe has an effect right the way up into the palate, and then can twist through into the sphenoid, which is part of your cheekbones, nasal bones, and eye sockets. And if you twist that, then it has an effect all the way up, and it starts to affect the frontals and the temples, which in turn have effects on the parentals and occipital. And if the occipital is twisted, it then affects the C1, so the top of your spine. And then that has an effect all the way down to the spine. And if the head gets locked in that position, then the spine can never straighten up properly. If the spine can never straighten up properly, that means it's going to affect your cerebral spinal fluids, which is going to and your central nervous system. And so, yeah, it has a massive effect on the body. So, yeah, that putting the head back in the correct position allows you to release the upper part of the spine, which in turn allows the whole spine to start correcting itself. And then that has effects on the central nervous system. So it's affecting your nerves flowing out to all the rest of the body. So, yeah, it has a massive effect. So putting the head back in the correct position, it's relatively easy to do.
It's very painful. I'll tell you that for free. You're always ripping my hair.
So no, I know, but it's just relatively easy to do. It's just technique, and people go off and they go and do the cranial sacral or cranial osteopathy or the SOT, which is the sacral-occipital technique, which is the chiropractic stuff, and learn these techniques, but these techniques need to be used with the techniques of releasing the rest of the body. If you just loosen up the head and you don't sort out the rest of the body, it's going to put the head back out again. If you just do the body and don't do the head, the body's going to go back out again because it doesn't work. It's not going to work properly. And so you kind of got to be aware of this. And so if you just go and see a cranial person, they don't do anything else, and you're going to go, well, it's not going to work. If you're just going to do the body and they don't do the cranial, then you go, well, no wonder I've got to keep going back time and time and time again because they're not doing the job.
Yeah, they're not doing the whole thing. Yes.
Not completing the job.
Holistically, isn't it? But that's why I think you make the key difference in the work that you do, because, you use the title as a chiro, but I think you're so much more than that. Like, literally anyone can come in your door, I feel. I mean, I send people all around the world to you, and, they leave and they go, wow, I've been to many people, but this man actually makes a difference. That's why I think people are willing to travel a flight or even, hours just to come see you. But I think it's also because you're very thorough, and I think you're passionate about your work. Your first session when you see people is 3 hours.
It's a lot about, kind of, like I say, it's the education. If you can teach the person what's going on, if they can start to understand what's going on and why it's going on. It's so many people that they've been sent to everyone. I mean, it's really is, it's so sad. I've seen so many people that's so sad. They've been literally sent to see everyone, and they still don't know what's going on or why it's going on. And so if I can explain a little bit about that, and what they can do about it, that changes their lives. I mean, that's important as far as I'm concerned. That's what we're there to do. That's our job. That's our job, is to help people to understand. And so that's what I try and do.
Yeah, I think because that's what I do as well. Like, my appointments are longer, and most people are like, "Oh, why are your appointments longer?" And I say, because I'm using the time as an induction to educate you and help you understand. And I think that's why, because I receive a lot of patients who are the ones who are either doctors don't want to see them anymore, the doctors have given up on them, someone says there's no hope, that kind of thing. So they're coming with a really closed down negative mindset, like at wit's end, they got no other options. What can I do? And you just say, sit with me a bit longer, let me tell you why. And then it's that, I think that fundamental step is you create the understanding. People go, oh, I didn't realize I'm doing that, or I didn't realize that is why I'm doing that. And then you create that awareness, which is what you say, that awareness, and you go, okay. So the same, I think about you all the time. So when I'm standing in the kitchen, because you always say never lock your knees, right? So then I think, what's the Tigger, then I think like, oh, I'm not doing that. Or if I'm sitting too long and all of a sudden I get this niggle in somewhere in my back, then I go, okay, I need to start. I made this joke, I was calling you the cult leader because everyone was doing, and you create such easy trigger actions, such easy homework, actually, I would say, that when you go to a certain place in the house, whether you go to the bathroom, you're in the kitchen, or you're standing idle, or you're at the desk, that kind of thing, then there's just this, a couple of movements that you say, just do this quickly, and then you'll think, okay, let me just move my pelvis around, because this, I think, is the core, because it's connecting the top and the bottom together, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't like the word, but yeah. Yeah, it's a central balancing point. Yeah, I spent a lot of time simplifying. I've so many times I've been to places and it's just too complicated. Let's simplify. Really, really make it as simple as you possibly can. I give a lot of people abdominal work to do, and so they release they release the tension which has been held around their bowels, digestion, inguinal, prostates, or or in other places. But, and so I give very, very, very simple things for people to do, which are quite effective to release those. And in doing so, it also releases their back, and then it allows them to release other sets of muscles and muscle groups. Yeah, keep things really, really simple. Give them very, very simple exercises, very simple things to think about, and then they'll apply them. And also give them things to do when they're doing other things. So I give exercise for people sitting on the toilet, or when they're standing in the kitchen where they're waiting for the kettle to boil, that sort of stuff. Rather than you've got to put half an hour aside to do all these exercises. No.
Practical, I like it.
Yeah, I try and fit it into their day so they apply it. And also, if they don't do it, they feel guilty. So it's what.
Yeah, you do. It's true.
So yeah, you think, well, I should have done that, and so they actually feel a little bit of guilt. And sometimes that's a good thing.
Yeah, the accountability,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because it is, even myself, like when I come to an appointment, I'm just like, oh, I know I've got some stuff to mention or be accountable for. Like I haven't been doing this as much, or
and he's gonna know.
Yeah, basic. But the thing is, you do know. Like I can just stand there and you can be like, you've been da 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 da, and I'm like, damn it! Like how do you know? But the beauty in that. But what I find, this is a fun question I want to ask you is, being, I would say, an expert or master in your art now. What did you actually want to be when you were growing up?
I had no idea. I had no idea. That's why I did what I did. I went off and joined the army for 8, and I was in the army for 8.5 years, and still didn't know what to do. So I became a electrician for a while. Did that for a while, and I damaged my back. I couldn't do that anymore, so I needed to find something else. So I went off and did acting and modeling, traveled around the world for 20 years or something.
Amazing.
That was quite good. And while I was doing that, I changed to do this, and it's because I damaged my back, and I was actually while I was I couldn't walk some of the time. It's about 3 years in pain. And I found doctors just threw pills at me. Physios just kind of rubbed an ultrasound, and we didn't really do much. Gave me exercises, but didn't work. Osteopaths I found were quite good at giving me relief, but it didn't last. Sometimes by the time I walked out of the clinic, I had it back again. And if I'd seen as chiropractors, I'm sure I'd probably had the similar sort of results, but I didn't. And I couldn't afford to see any more osteopaths, to be honest with you. And so I had to sort it out myself, and I did. And I did it with quite a few different kind of relaxing techniques and stretching techniques. And so I realized this is just technique. And so I then was interested enough to look into statistics, and I found that statistically, chiropractors are supposed to have the best results. I'm not sure if that's still true, but anyway, but I thought, well, if I can do what they can do, and I can add what I've learned, maybe that's something I can do in the future. And so I looked at it, and I looked. This is pre-internet, so I looked for whatever information I could find. And I found there was a college in Bournemouth, and I was living in London at the time, and with a full-time course, and it was expensive, and I didn't have the money, and I couldn't afford it, and all that sort of stuff, and I couldn't justify moving there. And so I just put it on the back burner. And then one day I was doing a play in Barcelona with a girl, and she said to me, "Oh, Ian, I'm packing all this in." I was like, what? You're a brilliant actress. You're joking. She goes, "No, I'm packing." "What are you going to do?" She said, "Oh, I'm going to become a chiropractor." I went, "Oh, I know about that. You're going to Bournemouth?" She said, "No, I'm doing it in Oxford."
Wow.
"You're doing your course in Oxford?" "Yes, yeah." I said, "Oh my God, I could drive to Oxford." Oxford isn't far from West London where I was living. I said, I could do that. And so when we got back, I went to see them in Oxford, and they said, "Well, what qualifications have you got?" I said, "Well, nothing relevant."
Acting modeling.
And the army stuff wasn't, and the school stuff wasn't brilliant. So it's like, And they went, well, don't you think you should go and get something then?" I went, "Oh yeah, I think it's probably a good idea." So I went and did an A-level in anatomy and loved it.
Oh wow, good.
Absolutely loved it. And I loved the way they taught it as well. They taught it in modules, so you could really concentrate on what you're doing. And so I thought this is really good. And so I then went back to see them. I contacted them, and they said, "Well, great, if you're doing that, you can come and join us in September." So that's kind of how I got into it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think? I think a pattern I've noticed is that usually a person's trauma becomes what they end up pursuing or get obsessed or passionate about.
Yeah, often, yeah.
You know, because I grew up with a lot of exposure to trauma, like literal trauma. So that's created my fascination in psychology. Why do people behave the way that they do? Why do they react in a certain situation that they do, or rather than respond? And it's interesting that your case as well. You had a trauma to your back, and you're just like, I need bloody relief.
Yeah,
How am I going to find it?
I think I'm someone who likes to work things out. I've never had a great memory, so I've always sort of had to sit down and work things out and work out how things work and all that sort of stuff. And I enjoy doing that. I'm a natural kind of inventor kind of person, and so I enjoy doing that. And I think different people have different mindsets, and so this kind of fits in with that. I think that's all it is. It's just that's my natural bent. I like doing that sort of thing, and this just happens to be the field I've fallen into. So I've just put those two things together.
Yeah, I remember because in high school, in second year of high school, we had to write these aptitude tests to see what you should be, and I always remember giggling, saying that they said I should have been a detective.
Oh, great! Okay.
So I was like, that's really weird. And then obviously when I started to become an accountant, I thought, I'm surely not doing that stuff, but yet I'm watching Sherlock Holmes and all that kind of thing. But
no, that's not true, though, is it? Because when you were an accountant, you weren't just an accountant. You actually went and your job within accounting was
to basically find things, right?
To
forensic
break the forensic stuff, wasn't it? So you did end up doing it anyway.
Fine for, but it's interesting now because for me it's like almost being a medical detective myself, because you're in I always say I'm trying to attract the weird and wonderful, the cases that are just strange and different and can't be helped, and then just trying to find a mean to create a customized protocol to help them. And then if you don't have the skills, like I can't do the bone cracking or detective work that you do, I just say you have to travel a few hours to go see the cult leader. I don't tell them that, but no, because I used to joke with that with Benoit and Yuka, just a couple of other friends that we have, that every time we sat down for dinner time, instead of necessarily saying a prayer for food, we would have to do one of your techniques.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. That's why I say I give them that technique. I'd say every time you sit down at a meal, do that, because you're sitting in a decent chair.
Hopefully, not everyone does.
No, but hopefully you're sitting at a table with a decent chair to do it, and if you're just applying that thought. I'm sitting down at a table. I do this exercise. It doesn't have to do it for long, just to feel everything loosens off a bit, and then I eat my meal. It's just applying, putting. It's that association, isn't it? If you can apply an association to something, hopefully they'll do it.
This hopefully will stick, isn't it?
Yeah, and also, like I say, people, it looks great in a restaurant.
Imagine, I'd love to do that, like just eventually just get everyone. I'd love to just pass on that, like those teachings with you, because I do tell this to people as well now, like whatever I've taken from you that I can pass on, I do when I see it's relevant. But I just laugh that maybe one day, like in a crowd full of people, you just go, do this, and then everyone's like, and then you get the odd people like, what the hell are they doing? Like almost like a flash mob or something like that. That would be really, really fun. But yeah, I suppose we can start to wind down for today. And I just want to say thank you for coming in and, just giving sort of a perspective from your background, your understanding, as well as your teaching. Because I do think from the work that I've seen you do, from the cases, as well as just myself personally, I think you've definitely developed a new system, a much better system in a sense, more simplified, more understood, that hopefully that will be shared with people at some point when I think you switch from your roles of just being physical in person, but maybe to role of educator in that sense of, passing teaching, on your teachings. So, and if any way we can try help make that possible, we will. Okay. But yeah, I think, so really nice to have you on, especially for my first person. It was really great. I thank you so much for, that's been fun. Giving me the opportunity just to practice everything and see what's on. But it's really good. And I'm sure, the people that will listen to this might have a few questions or might even be coming to see you because they're going to be like, who is that man? You're going to have an influx of people now. Maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know. This must be a bit of a queue. Yeah. There is a bit of a waiting list for you, isn't it? Like most people have to wait a month or so just to sort of just get in, huh? Yeah, sometimes I use my power, just like say you know me, and then you can get in. But yeah, I think it's always at the right time. If someone needs to come in, the universe will like sort of maneuver it that someone might cancel. Something will open up or that kind of thing. Sometimes I get cancellation, so yeah, I can slot people in. But yeah. I see a limited amount of people, so it is quite difficult. Yeah, I mean, it's very energy consuming because you give your heart, your soul, your everything to someone when you treat. And I think that's something I notice as well, because I often don't necessarily like going for other treatments with other people if I can do the treatment myself, because, just get the impression that people are not invested. They're just sort of doing it as a job now, not really they're doing it for a purpose or a passion. And I think still to this day you have that, and that's where the differences I think are critical and crucial for people, because when you have someone who's loving you with compassion and healing and wants to see you get better and is rooting for you on the sidelines, I think that does make the difference. So yeah, I think it helps that. But I feel like I'm still learning, and which is great. And so all the time I can still learn. I'll still be interested. Yeah, lifelong student, isn't it? Yeah. This is the thing. The more you know you don't know nothing. So I find your ego just gets popped every so occasion, and goes, "You think you know something?" Here's someone that walks in, you know nothing, and you're like, "Humble, thank you. Let me go back to the drawing board." Yeah. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to end this now. Probably go for lunch after now as well. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So that's a wrap. Great. Thanks. Bye.